Hello everyone. Welcome to today's ODI Global in Conversation event. I can't believe it's a Friday morning, just before the holidays, and we have a full room and hundreds of people online. There are very few people that can fill this room to capacity on a Friday morning before the holidays, and one of them is Francesca Albanese. I'm truly delighted to welcome a dear friend of mine, a friend of ODI Global, Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967. I think it's fair to say that for many of us, both in this room and the very many people who have joined us online today, Francesca has become a vital voice at a moment when courage is in desperately short supply. I think over the past 26 months, we've seen more and more people start to speak up as the extent of the destruction and the atrocities have become hard to deny. We've seen civil society organizations, we have seen artists, we've seen political leaders, but Francesca has been one of the clearest, most unflinching voices, very much from the very first moment. And of course, Francesca has been speaking the truth about the occupied Palestinian territory long before the 7th of October. The conditions of systemic oppression under which the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank are forced to live did not start after the 7th of October, as we've been documenting for many years at ODI Global. The conditions are rooted in over a century of dispossession, of displacement, and impunity. And I think what Francesca has done since then, through her UN reports, through her public speaking, through her relentless advocacy, has been to refuse to let international law be buried under the rubble of Gaza. She has insisted again and again on the universality of rights, on the primacy of international law, and above all, on the humanity of a people whose suffering has been normalized by the world for far too long. Her landmark report, Anatomy of Genocide, called Gaza what it is: strangled, starved, shattered. And I love that report because it really exposes the global system, political, economic, technological, military, that enables and profits from occupation, that enables and profits from apartheid, and now from genocide. And Francesca really names the states that are still supplying weapons as evidence as mounted. She names the corporations whose technology reinforces the surveillance, the displacement, the violence, and she names the multilateral failures that have allowed a colonial system of dispossessions to metastasize into the ultimate crime, really. And I think she does that without fear, but more importantly, without losing sight of the human beings that are at the center of this catastrophe. And this is why you're here today, and this is why the room is full. Francesca, thank you for your leadership, for your integrity, for standing firmly and bravely by the principles that should guide us all. Please join me in welcoming Francesca Albanese. Francesca, I want to start by setting the events into the wider historical framework. As I said, many people seem to think that the crisis started on the 7th of October, in reaction to the horrific Hamas attack. But after you were appointed, I invited you to come and speak about the situation of Palestine on our podcast on Think Change, together with Ken Roth, who was a Human Rights Watch at the time, and Hissan Adel, who was a Palestinian lawyer. This was, I think, August of 2023. And we really discussed the conditions of apartheid under which, Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank live. But, most of the coverage about Gaza really seems to be ahistorical and place all of this just in reaction to, the 7th of October, without looking at the wider erosion of international humanitarian law and human rights law that has preceded that. And I actually read the very poignant stories in your book, When the World Sleeps, and many of them, of course, go back to when you first went to live in Jerusalem, or after your mandate was given to you. Can you help us put current events into context?
First of all, thank you very much for having me here, and thank you for filling this room. I think I was just commenting on my colleague on the way here that I do see now clearly. It took me 20 years to understand and to see concretely what Antonio Gramsci or Edward Said referred to when they spoke of cultural hegemony. We have been like waking up in a nightmare that looks like a sudden nightmare because we have been induced to think that we were part of a dream, or made of wealth, made of comfort, made of not feeling primary needs. But it was a lie. It was a fabrication. It was a projection, because in fact, I do not think that what we have before our eyes is a sudden abomination. Palestine is a metaphor today to understand the world. But the reason why many of us have woken up on October 7 or after October 7, and many in power insist in maintaining that pretense that it's really the abomination of the past 2 years that we should be talking about. This is just a projection of that cultural hegemony. So there are many things I think we might go back to in our exchange. It's also understanding the counterinsurgency. The counter in this that is coming from popular action. But however, to put what's happening in context, and I recommend everyone, perhaps during the holiday season, you can watch it, because it also concerns the history of this country. I mean, for me, it's painful to come back to this country, to this city, which has been a laboratory of imperialism and has the audacity through its government officials to continue impose that colonial mindset, having also the pretense of embodying the rule of law. Come on, give us a break. There is this movie that has just come out, that it's Palestine 1936, that shows the beginning of the end for the Palestinian as a people, and the responsibility is of the British government back then, and now there is a necessity to unpack it, to go back to it, because Israel has inherited practices that were experimented on the Palestinians by the British first and foremost. The punitive house demolition, the administrative detention, or the systematization of torture. This is something that was part of the colonial architecture through which the British established their presence in Palestine, and then gave away a land that was never theirs to give. So we cannot understand what's happening today without going back to British colonial presence in Palestine. But because it also speaks to the resistance, that word that we cannot pronounce, connected to the Palestinians, because it resonates with terrorism. No, but for the Palestinians, resistance is a necessity, and it's primarily peaceful. It's resisting in a place against all odds and against attempts to remove them physically, culturally, and spiritually. This has been the continuation of colonial presence. I mean, I wish Israel could be something different. I hope. I'm not questioning Israel for what it is, but for what it does. And if Israel didn't want to be accused of colonial practices, it should not behave as a colonial power, as a colonial entity, taking land, displacing the people, and practicing really settler colonial methods. So, but going back to resistance for the Palestinians is historical, not ideological. It started in 1936-39. This was the first intifada, in fact, an uprising against the British, and it has continued. It has continued, and it will always continue. And honestly, in as much as I condemn violence of all forms, civilians should never be touched, should never be targeted, neither Israelis nor Palestinian nor anyone else. Violence becomes inevitable when when powers deprive a population to benefit from the law and seeing law works. Because what we see today, and this is where I will conclude, what we see today in Gaza, is it the failure of the law? Yes, to an extent, because law, the international legal system would have been sufficient to prevent, to stop, and to make reparations for what is happening. And it's not. As we speak, there are people, children and their families in the elements, exposed to the elements. I mean, it's painful. For me, it's really physically, it has become physically painful to coexist with the thought of what is going on in Gaza, like in the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory as we speak. And this is what's happening is the result of political ineptitude, inadequacy, and complicity. So we have had 2 years of genocide, which are the culmination of 60 years of impunity, and it continues. And it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop until and unless things change in London or in Rome or in Berlin or in Paris. So it brings the responsibility upon us.
Very interesting what you say. While you were talking, I was thinking we did a lot of work here on the impact of counter-terror laws and measures, and the very nebulous definition of terrorism. You know, someone's terrorist can be someone else's freedom fighter. Yeah. But you know, the if you want, the ambiguity of the whole concept really sort of clashes with the clarity of international law on these things. But I want to talk actually about I think what is for me one of the most striking aspects of your recent work, which is the way in which you connect what is happening on the ground in Gaza and in the West Bank to the broader global system. You know, these supply chains, financial flows, you know, political and economic interests, and you know how you describe that there's been a shift from the economy of occupation to the economy of genocide. Can you unpack what you mean by economy of genocide? You know, how these economic and financial systems and political choice interact to sustain these structures of violence and dispossessions that you talk about?
Yeah, I resent the fact that it took me so long to understand this, because this is the core of the matter, and this is why that report, of all reports I've written, has been the most hurtful and harmful to the system. And there was a very well-known, I won't disclose his name, but it was a very well-known economist with whom I spoke after publishing, or while I was in the process of publishing the report, which is called From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide. And he said, oh my God, but so it's private interest behind all this. This is why the occupation has been sustained. I said, only a lawyer could be surprised of this. I said, thank you. It's and I'm also married to an economist, so it's his fault. It was not. It was
the economist who worked at ODI.
Yes, ODI somewhat is home because he used to work here. So basically, I've written 7 reports by now as a UN Special Rapporteur on self-determination, on children, on carcerality, so that why nearly 1 million Palestinians have been detained by Israel, including children, 12-year-old children, in nearly 60 years. But then October 7 happened, and this violent military campaign was unleashed against Gaza, and so anatomy of a genocide, it's an X-ray of acts that have been committed. And we shouldn't, I'm also upset with lawyers sometimes because it seems that they go around what's happening in Gaza with a microscope looking for the intent behind each act. Well, no, I say in order to understand the genocidal intent, take a step back. Look at the entire picture. Look at what has led the violence to be so furious, which is the widespread dehumanization of the Palestinians among Israelis, most Israelis, unfortunately, but also here, frankly. I mean, yesterday I was in an interview and someone, a journalist at Channel 4 said, oh, but don't you think that you are part of the problem being such a purist? Purist because I keep on complaining that 400 Palestinians have been killed since the beginning of a ceasefire, and the question that it's really a ceasefire, and they say, yeah, but it's less than before. So is it normal that 10, 20 people are killed every day, or 3? No, it's not. And this is why I say this doesn't speak only to how bad the situation is on the ground, but how miserable, what kind of monsters we have become in this society where we can normalize this situation. But however, so I traced this, and then I spoke of how this genocide is part of a colonial erasure. Genocide is a means to an end, is a crime where the intentional destruction of the Palestinians as such. And please, if there were one element I would like to keep from the is it genocide or is not genocide, look at how people are treated. They don't count as children, as doctors, or as journalists. As long as they are Palestinians, they are presumed guilty, then targeted. They become killable, they become destroyable, they become torturable because they are Palestinians. They are Palestinians, therefore they are a threat. And this is a common element to all genocides. The Bosnians were killable, rapeable, torturable, and so the Tutsi in Rwanda. So but then I also understood, because I kept on asking myself, how come? How come we cannot stop it? And I decided that over this year, I would unpack the complicity. For sure, there is state complicity. And in my last report, this is what I write. I mean, I document how 62 states, including this one, provide military, diplomatic, political, strategic support to Israel to continue to commit its crimes. And also, I mean, Israel is embedded in our economy, and this is part of the problem. But this is where the private sector is so critical, because the private sector has been, and I'm talking of arms manufacturers, producers of heavy machinery, like Caterpillar, for example. All this has been used. The use of force has been used to displace the Palestinians from the occupied Palestinian territory, but then also to replace them with colonies. Think of all the businesses that have contributed to build infrastructure, roads, electricity grid, or to exploit Palestinian resources. I mentioned 48 businesses, but there is this Heidelberg cement company, this German company, which gets concessions from the State of Israel to extract extract from the quarries in the occupied Palestinian territory. So they are participating in an international crime, in a war crime of pillage. They are pillaging Palestinian resources to build the colonies. Or Volvo, it's providing trucks and heavy machineries that it's been, after being used to pulverize and to demolish Palestinian homes, now they are used, this Hyundai and Volvo machinery is being used to turn into dust what remains of the buildings of Gaza. This is why I say this industry has been used to maintain an economy of occupation that has helped Israel, but also has made these businesses profitable, and now it's turning into an economy of genocide. So these businesses, which should have disengaged from Israel before, before October. I mean, for decades there was documentation that of the human rights impact that they would have, and they have not done it. So violating their obligations their responsibilities under international law. But there is another aspect that it's even more sadistic and cynical, is that it's not just businesses, it's universities, research centers, banks, pension funds. There is not one sector of our economy, of our economic life that is not, that doesn't lead to what Israel is doing. Even the Norwegian pension fund, for me, this has been the prime example of hypocrisy. Because Norway, allegedly one of the friendliest states toward the Palestinians, has its pension fund, meaning they sell oil and the revenues are invested. 10% of the sovereign wealth of Norway is invested in all the companies I investigated, which are little. I have a database of 1,000 entries, and 48 of them, you have the Norwegian pension funds like footprint. 10% of its value is invested in these 48. So of course, you say, how shocking it is. You need to divest. There has been pressure, there has been some divestment. The Labour Party even won the elections, promising that they would disengage from these businesses. And then what do? The moment they are in parliament, they ally themselves with the right-wing forces to say, you know what, not only we are not going to divest, but we are even scrapping the ethical guidelines. Who needs them? So this is the world we live in. And so it's really cynical.
You're paying a very high personal price for exposing this global collusion with friends who I know I can go there and you know. You are the first, actually the only, UN Special Rapporteur to be placed under sanctions by the US government. But not everyone in this room is aware of the very deep impact these sanctions are having on you. First of all, in terms of discharging your mandate, and that's actually the reason why they have been put under sanctions, is pretty much for discharging your mandate. But this is, the sanctions are having an impact, and they're having an impact on your, on you personally, on the life of your family. Would you like to share, what these sanctions have meant in practice?
Yeah, very, very briefly. I mean, I've not been speaking publicly about that for a few months because I really didn't want that the personal drama associated with it distracted our attention from Palestine. And at the same time, it's important, and it's important for people to understand what's happening to us, to me, to Palestinian human rights organizations, and to the judges and prosecutors of the International Criminal Court. We are all sanctioned. Yes, I am the first UN person in 80 years to ever be sanctioned, and I hope I'm the last one. But there has not been a robust enough response or a robust enough response to this to have the sanctions lifted, the only thing that should happen. So the sanctions mean that we are considered like criminals under the US, in the US legal system. We represent a threat to the US security. We are banned from traveling to the US, which of course has an impact on me because I should be presenting my reports to the General Assembly. But what happens to us personally, it's even more pernicious because we are financially censored. So we cannot open a bank account. And not just in the US, because wherever we are dominated, when it comes to banks, we are under US law. This is the reality, because if a bank opens an account to me, they might incur in secondary sanctions, which are what every US person engaging with us risks. Penalties up to $1 million. Any American citizen here don't come to me even offering a chewing gum, because you could be liable of, you would commit a felony. So you could be held up in jail. You could be arrested up to 20 years, and you could have to pay up to $1 million for engaging with me. And what have I done other than, I mean, I was in an interview with Tucker Carlson. I was shocked. I said, oh my God, but is there anything else you are not saying? No. Do you have relations with Hamas? No. And even if, I mean, no, but it's no. It's this. It's not, it's about me, but it's not about me. It's not about me because through sanctioning me or the ICC or Palestinian Human Rights Organization, they're trying and failing to sanction the truth, to silence the truth. But it also has a very personal dimension in my case, because I am the mother of an American daughter, of an American citizen. Where is our First Amendment? It's such a betrayal, what the US, I mean, I used to live in the US. I used to, I had an affiliation with a US university. I used to lecture there. Everything has been cut down, and the chilling effect on those US persons working with me, it's felt. So this is the world we live in right now.
Let's go back to Gaza. You spoke at our humanitarian event last year, and you had a very clear message that really resonated in the room, telling all humanitarian organizations that were listening to you that, we were very much sitting on the fence. They were very much sitting on the fence, and that was part of the problem. But this year, we've really seen some extraordinary attempts, to isolate and bypass the traditional humanitarian system and try to recreate some humanitarian legitimacy with what we called corporate humanitarians, like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and the like. And while it operated, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation very much weaponized aid. So how can humanitarian organizations really ensure that civilians are not caught in another experiment like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundations, when you have really powerful states that are very much erasing, if you want, the international humanitarian law and respecting the mandate of humanitarian organizations?
Yeah, last year I was quite critical, and I remain quite critical of the humanitarian sector, although I have more compassion today because the humanitarian sector is also targeted under attack. And again, you see, it seemed to be what I said last year became a self-fulfilling prophecy, in a sense. If we don't stick together, even if we don't protect the values that underpin our work, being humanitarians or being human rights lawyers or being politicians, we should have a common, we should share common values and an understanding that human rights are the line, these human rights, the respect for human rights should be the fence on which everyone sits. Instead, there has been a mors tua, vita mea sort of approach. It touches you, it doesn't touch me, it's okay. It's failing. I've referred to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation either as a death trap, as Amnesty International did, but also as a criminal endeavor, as a joint criminal endeavor. And not just in its in the execution of its mandate. I want to recall that 1,600 Palestinians have been killed while seeking aid. After months that they had been starving, and while aid was distributed in the most undignified conditions. And again, where was the revolt among the humanitarians? Seriously, this is something that should have provoked strikes among you guys, everyone. It's the normalization of this brutality that leaves me hopeless. Because we are not shaken. Eventually, I keep on saying, eventually, at the end of the day, we go back to the comfort of our homes, of our life, and we don't care. And this is what what I think is also the seed of the end of this comforting sense of, we are doing humanitarian work. No, I do think that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that now has been dismantled, not because it has been there is regret behind this plan, but because now it's part of the, it has moved into the veins of the transitional, I mean, the peace plan, whatever that 20-point thought ball is. This is that idea that aid can be distributed by those who have been committing or authorizing or executing, either thinking, conceiving, or executing orders, part of a genocidal plan. And they could be the same distributing aid. This is the paradox that we have reached. And I fear that this is a new method that will make humanitarian work as we have known it until October 2023, or until this year, irrelevant.
I agree with what you say, but I mean, I also look at what's happened in this country over definitely last year, perhaps a bit less the year before. There has been an attempt, to stand up, to react. There've been plenty of protests, and of course, over the past few months, I've seen, so many people acting in solidarity with Palestine Action, not because necessarily they believed in what Palestine Action has done, but just sort of upholding the right to protest. People they've actually ended up being arrested, incredibly, under extraordinary sorts of powers for the right to protest. What else can people in the UK, elsewhere, do to really push this third-party state not to act in complicity?
Yeah, in as much as I sound bitter, and sorry about that, it's just that 2 years of genocide have taken a toll on my patients. But I think that what gives me hope, like a sense that things can change, that this is not the end of it, that this is probably the darkest moment, but we know, I mean, we also have a popular saying, it cannot get darker than midnight. I hope so. And there have been people protesting. There have been, and now it's right what you say. What has happened to Palestine Action, but also before, the fact that journalists could be criminalized or held on account of terrorism because of their work on Palestine. It has touched the nerve of the system, because eventually it boils down to freedom, basic freedoms and basic rights as British people or in this country. And what has happened to Palestine Action speaks even louder to that, because it's about freedom of expression. It's freedom to express, to peacefully express dissent. And this is creating a mobilization of people who wouldn't necessarily feel compelled to take the streets because of Palestine, but it's for something that touches British people as British. And I think it's healthy. It's healthy. And I would say, yes, please continue, as it's happening in Italy. I mean, I'm so happy to see Italians do what British people have always done. I mean, I was here during the years, and it was years during which I saw many British protesting against the Iraq war. For 2-3 years, the protests went on for 2-3 years. It's a long time, it's a long endurance. And so I say, you can do that, as you did it last year, I mean, at that time, keep doing that, but now we need to be more strategic. Protesting up to a point. But what part of the Palestine effect is, it's awakening us, it's helping us connect the dots. You see, in the name of Palestine, or silencing the criticism around Palestine, European governments like this one have been curtailing or attacking or undermining fundamental freedoms. Here, in Germany, in Italy, in France, and the people are reacting. So it's good. I mean, I see now in Italy there has been a sustained taking the streets of ordinary people who had never engaged on Palestine, and students and workers with their families. And again, because they also connect the current misery of the Palestinians to an attempt of their government to shift priorities toward rearmament, toward the culture of war. And so they see that this is also putting at risk their interests. And so, yes, there is awakening, yes, there is connecting dots, but there is also a need to coordinate actions. And Palestine has provided a grammar to engage and take ethical steps, ethical measures as states, as businesses or private entities, and as citizens. And states must cut ties with Israel, must stop aiding and assisting a state that maintains an unlawful occupation that, according to the International Court of Justice, must be dismantled, military troops, settlements, and exploitation of Palestinian resources. So, which is committing the crime of apartheid, which is committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. There shouldn't be this handshaking and constant receiving with the red carpet Israeli leaders. Come on. It happens in this country, it happens in my country. This is abnormal, and there should be a reaction to this, because the only legal thing that our governments can do is to cut ties with Israel. And at the same time, and if not, these government officials must be held accountable. In Italy right now, in as much that she's shocked, the head of government needs to realize that what lawyers are doing, taking her to the ICC for complicity in genocide, is the right course of action. This is the Nuremberg effect 2.0. I mean, we might not have another Nuremberg, but the Palestine trials might be this, that those who have committed crimes and those who have been complicit with Israeli crimes face justice wherever they are, here in the UK or in Italy or elsewhere. But also, governments states should cut ties, businesses should divest, and we all have a power to exercise their pocket power. So we need to, BDS, Profundo, Don't Buy Into the Occupation, and others have listed all the companies, the banks, pension funds, and all institutions connected to the economy of the occupation. So check which your bank is. Make sure that there is no purchase of genocide-related funds. This is going to have a positive effect on us as well. And also as consumers, and this is the last thing, we must make ethical choices. Voilà. What we buy, it makes a difference, and this is where we can, and then of course participating into a public life that makes people accountable, from government officials to businesses.
You will have seen this calls for the British public for the cultural boycott of Eurovision, which is a big thing in this country, so it's interesting to see this popular move in that place. I would like to continue asking you questions, but I know that many other people want to do so. So I'll open it up to the audience here and online. I really urge everyone to be brief and to ask questions so that we can get more in. There are roving mics, so raise your hand. Gosh, that was the iPad gone. Say who you are or start in the room. Start maybe here. And, oh my gosh, there's plenty. Okay, I'll take as many as we can. Start with the two colleagues here, with Ian and the lady here. Please introduce yourselves, and if I figure out that
hello, I'm at Department of Energy Security Net Zero on a career break because I have a toddler. Just wanted to ask, given, you've spoken about your frustration with people not caring, but at the same time, can you suggest where you might think the biggest shift will be? Because at the moment, what we know is that could it be the right on the US? Because we're seeing that there's a division between MAGA versus Israel first versus America first. So that seems to be a big change, whether the right in the US will be able to make a decisive change in what's going on in Israel if the US stops supporting, because they're focusing on US first rather than Israel first policy, and whether that can and whether we also have to understand in reality the reason why we're seeing so many red flags being crossed, like formula milk not being able to being confiscated by the IDF via the flotilla. the Irish Red Cross at an EU institution, fundraisers being considered anti-Semitic for what was going for Irish Red Cross fundraisers for Gaza. Isn't this a reflection of the fact that you have many IDF sympathisers in the US, like the Sheldon Adelson support, what was it, Larry Ellison? So you have like $200 million worth of political contributions towards the Trump administration, which has led to your ICC sanctions. So, I mean, these are the actors at play. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you pass the mic?
Hi, I'm Ian Martin. I'm the chair of the United Nations Association of the UK, and I offer you solidarity on behalf of the great majority of our members. As you know, Francesca, I did a strategic assessment of UNRWA for the UN Secretary General this year, which was an opportunity to put on record what an admirable organisation UNRWA has been and is and has continued to be, even in the most difficult of circumstances. You will have seen a very well-sourced report that the US administration is now considering imposing sanctions, perhaps even to the point of declaring UNRWA a foreign terrorist organisation, which would have staggering implications. So I want to ask you, coming on top of the sanctions on yourself, on the ICC judges and prosecutors, I think you rightly said that the pushback against that has been pretty pathetic from those who ought to have been pushing back against it, including from the UK government. Can you say a bit more about what pushback now must come at a moment when I think the US national security strategy is also opening up opportunities to split some of the European countries further away from the US administration?
Did you take a couple more before you respond? Right. Stay there.
Hi, hello, my name is Laura. Francesca, thank you so much for your speech and everything you do. As a fellow Italian, I can see that you're a beacon of hope for the Italians who feel wrongly represented by our government, so really thank you. I work on European Development Finance at the Center for Global Development. First, I wanted to echo Gabriele Nunziati's question to you, asking if you believe Israel should repay for the reconstruction of Gaza, and maybe also sharing your reflection of what has happened with the Commission there and Agenzia Nova, and also going maybe a step further, just because I'm interested, with all the current talks about Euroclear and what the new strategy is to use Russian frozen assets to reconstruct Ukraine, continuing the discussion on the economy of genocide that you mentioned before. What to you are the major walls to break through to expand these strategies to the reconstruction of Palestine within the EU institution right now that we can work on? Thank you so much.
Thanks. I've got a few online as well. Is there anyone else in the room? Claire.
I know this is a bit beyond your remit, and I admire your bravery and courage and your intellectual clarity. But Ilan Pappé thinks that the poison that's gone into Israel will destroy the country. Can you comment on that? Is that one of the ways that we might get some progress? Do you feel free to tell us what you think?
I do.
Do we start with that, and then I'll go?
Yeah.
And Claire Short, former Minister for Development.
Yeah, look, the first thing I've said in the first interview I gave on the 8th of October 2023, I was in complete shock. I said, oh my God, after all what I saw, I said, I'm not going to be able to continue this. I'm done with it. I can't. And then I regained some clarity, and I said, no, wait a second. This is the moment, and this is what I said during the interview. This is the moment where the world is to pause, and this is a moment for states to show wisdom and compassion toward both the Israelis and the Palestinians. Because surely I was, like anyone else, shocked about what I saw, what had been done to Israeli civilians, but I also saw where it came from. You need to, there has been also a lot of misinformation and fabrications, but I don't think that we should, in the latest, undermine the pain, not undermine, underestimate the pain, and also obscure the gravity of what has been done to the Israeli civilians on October 7. And I'm glad my comrade Agnes Calamari is here, the Secretary General of Amnesty International, because I expect Amnesty International will come under a barrage of accusation and attacks for a report on October 7, but we should, and the crimes that were committed on that day, they were crimes committed, there is no question about that. But I also said, now it's the time to pause and understand that this is the point of non-return. Now it's time to stop this violence. But how do you do that? Understanding the root causes of this violence, which in fact, as I said, come from afar, from very far. And I've said steadily, even before October 2023, there is a need to stop Israel's apartheid and to make it accountable, because it's harming surely the Palestinians, but invisibly the Israelis. Because you cannot keep on brutalizing another people without losing your humanity in the process. And it's exactly what is happening today. I mean, we don't talk about that very much, but there are so many young Israelis who are coming back to senses and taking their lives because they cannot live with the demons unleashed by what they've done to the people in Gaza. They've killed civilians like with no respite. And so now, yes, I think that this might be the end. This might be the end of, actually, it is the end of Israel as a value system, whatever broken the values were because of practicing apartheid. But I think this is, as I agree with Ilan Pappe, when he says this is the beginning of the end, unless they are stopped before it's too late. And this is where we are. I think it's already pretty late, but it is what it is. So I do see that, especially when there is something that we don't know, or we don't know to the fullest, is that we know more or less what has been done to the Palestinians in the open air, in Gaza, in the West Bank, but what has been done in detention centers. This is another level. Again, I do believe that even the comparison with some of the most horrific genocides will lose meanings, because the way Palestinians have been tortured systematically and even often raped, very often raped. I mean, this speaks to the Israeli society, because eventually soldiers are part of the society, and there is open discussion in Israeli society about the fact that Palestinians should be raped. The thing is that I'm only investigated cases of civilians. I don't even know where the combatants are. They are not held in known centers. They are not visited. So if they are doing this to civilians, to men, women, and children, I can't imagine what they are doing to those who have been fighting. And so this is a long answer, but to tell you, I mean, we're still unpacking what Israel has become.
Well, I have questions about the reparations. Should Israel pay for the destruction?
Yes, absolutely. Not just Israel and the countries who are complicit, including this one. Frankly, you have been providing weapons so there should be a full assessment of the complicity. So Israel should pay, but should have paid also before. The International Court, this is not my opinion, this is not an opinion. The International Court of Justice in January 2024 concluded the occupation is unlawful. It's a form of aggression. It say that other than in the explicit way I'm saying that, but the moment he said it's a violation of the UN Charter, it's a form of aggression against the Palestinian people, which justifies resistance, by the way. Resistance is the equivalent to a people of what the right to defend itself is to a state. And so, and the court said the occupation must be dismantled, the colonies must be dismantled, Israel should stop using Palestinian resources and should offer reparations for what has done to the Palestinians during decades of unlawful occupation. So of course Israel is to make reparations. All the more Israel should pay for the reconstruction of Gaza, together with the United States, together with Germany and Italy, who are the main weapons providers, but also the UK. And that there should be a robust investigation on the UK's complicity with this genocide through its the services that have been provided to the Cyprus from the Cyprus-based basis that it is there. And sorry, what was the other part of the question concerning reconstruction?
It's about Gabriele Scienziati's kind of question of the Commission, where he asked,
Yeah.
you know, if Israel should pay and the Commission.
Yeah, now, let's be honest. Let's be honest about the European Union. I don't think that the European Union has ever been so clearly and quintessentially honest toward the outside world for what it is. A continuation, a bureaucratic conduit for European countries to continue to live as a colonial, as a colonial mindset. Europe today, the European Union is the heir of colonial powers, no more, no less. And this is why it puts economic interests before anything else, but not economic interest of the European people, mind you. The economic interest of those in power, who are in power because they are also connected to totally connected to the economic and financial system that again is profiting from an economy of occupation, but is also profiting from rearming themselves, these countries. So Europe, should be questioned today. I strongly believe in the European Union, but I want a European Union which is of the people and for the people, and not for like a reproduction, a minion of an Atlantist minion, which is what it is today. And it's also a good opportunity now to question the colonial roots of the European Union, because as part of Maastricht treaties and the other treaties that constitute fundamental European Union's law, there is the fact that the colonial underpinnings of the unions have never been questioned. And this is a good opportunity to do that. I do agree that the United Nations response, you said, has been pathetic. I do agree, but this is a result not just or not much of lack of, let me be gentle with the United Nations, it's almost Christmas. Yeah, let's say it's not lack of vision, it's not a lack of courage, it's also the United Nations. It's living the most, the face of highest vulnerability of the institution. But it's not that it fell upon the head of the United Nations. UNRWA has been tormented by Zionist forces for 20 years. I was already with UNRWA in 2010, and UNRWA has already gone through at least 5 years of accusations of anti-Semitism, of fostering, of supporting terrorism against Israel, which are lies. And I don't think the United Nations, as a family of organizations, not just family of states, of organizations, has stood in solidarity with UNRWA. When the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights was kicked out from the occupied territory, I think it was 5 years ago, because of their report on businesses, the setup of the database on business complicity. The other entities, the other organizations didn't make a peep, didn't say a word, because it was OHCHR. They went for OHCHR, then they went more robustly for UNRWA, against UNRWA. UNRWA has been declared already a non grata entity by the Knesset, so UNRWA can already not fully operate through Israel. And frankly, the United Nations has not protected UNRWA, first and foremost. Like, it's not effectively protecting me, and it's crumbling, you know? So this is why, yeah, I mean, I don't know how the organization will survive. But to be honest, and even, as I said, for the European Union, I do believe, I do want to have a multilateral system as a platform that protects all of us. But if the United Nations is this, do we really need it as an extra layer of dominance? No. So I do want to hope that this moment of crisis is what will turn the system truly democratic. And of course, we should have no veto power. But it won't happen by inertia. It won't happen by generous initiative of the veto power holders. No, it is there must be a popular action turning into this, and also mobilization of the 191 members of the United Nations. And there was another
question. There's a question on the US, which perhaps is a bit outside your mandate, but if you want to comment on that, on whether, you know, the MAGA tensions may actually lead to a...
Yeah, I've never thought about that. But then 2 nights ago, I had this entertaining interview with Tucker Carlson, and we managed to agree. I mean, I think he's come around on Palestine, because 5 years ago he was not there. Today, he sees that what the United States are helping Israel to do is wrong, which I agree with. But I come from a universalist and international law-based perspective, while it comes from another perspective, Christianity, which I appreciate. Because again, how can you defend what Israel, supported by the United States and others, are doing in the name of God? What kind of broken religious compass do these people have? Because one thing we should agree upon is that children should not be starved, should not be maimed, should not be killed, should not be living as they are, in permanent terror, as they are Palestinians. So yeah, I think that he comes from a place of Christianity, and he comes from a place of why we should spend US taxpayers' money on funding this. And yeah, this is the breaking point, I think, in the US support basis. And it's exposing also what John Mearsheimer, for example, has said for 20 years. I mean, there is an Israel lobby in the United States, but the way I see it, and it's not that I've written or researched, this is really it's empirical for me, but there is a lobby, there are lobbies, and Zionism is not something that is connected to the Jewish people only. Christian Zionism is even more pernicious, and I see something that I've never seen, the widespread, the spreading of Christian Zionism as an ideology, which misuses religion and misplaces religion. That is not just in the US, it's obvious. Ted Cruz, I mean, these people talking about religion without even knowing what they're talking about, clearly. But it exists in my own country, in Italy. The most active political supporters of Israel, and connecting this to religion, are Christian. And the same thing it's happening in Latin America, the same thing it's happening in Africa, which is also reflected into the erosion of some actors in the global South support toward Palestine.
We're very much at time. I have a lot of questions from the online audience. I feel bad. I don't know whether we should entertain one or two, or really should stick to time, because I know you're busy and probably people really need to go back to their weekends. But your choice.
Excuse me, I have a random question. I mean, this is true that the UK is getting more Islamic. Do you take a day off on Friday?
No, but the weekend kind of starts on Friday afternoon, and so people, get to lunchtime.
It's good.
COVID has really changed.
No, I think I mean, British people are good at taking what is good in other cultures. Let's put it this way. Italian food, the Friday off. Good guys.
Completely off. But maybe I'll just get one or two if we can quickly address it. So there's a question from Chloe Desoye, an independent consultant, humanitarian policy based in Oxford, who asked more to the UN point, why don't you have more support from the UN? Partly addressed that. It is a huge humiliation that the US is dealing with the ceasefire instead of the UN. How can the UN gain its authority back? And then I'll take one more from Anushka Sisodia, one of our researchers here at ODI, who says, despite widespread outrage amongst the public and civil society, there remains a disconnect in Western governments that fail to act or make only mere political gestures rather than changing policy in any meaningful way. What other political levers can we use to pressure governments to make a real difference?
Look, in as much as I'm really upset and disappointed with the system, I also think that this is such a powerful moment, because it's not that all of a sudden we discover, we are monsters. No, this is what humanity is also, a continuous struggle to get better or worse. But I keep on telling people, hey, 200 years ago, we were trading humans as slaves. You, not me. No, I'm joking. We as humanity, no? We were trading humans as slaves. Even we were burning women in the public squares as witches. And people were lynched in countries that call themselves democracies because of the color of their skin. Apartheid existed until 6 years ago and still exists. Racial segregation still exists in many places. So what I think is critical of this moment is the conscientization that we are going through. We realize we have full sense, we can make full sense of who we are as a collective. Again, I insist this is not the first genocide that happens in our lifetime for most of us. And still, this is the first genocide that is provoking global awakening, global connecting the dots. Is it the failure? Is it the end of international law? I don't think so, because if I had to put in the genocide and the heavy load of the genocide aside, I've never seen so many young people owning international law, speaking the language of international law and human rights. This brings us to question certain things of the society, the compartmentalization. Yesterday, and I was at SOAS, and I said this is a time also for us as legal scholars to criticize ourselves, to be introspective and saying perhaps we should get out of the ivory tower of academia. You cannot teach students human rights and then as depoliticized. Human rights are very political because human rights are tools to correct the system when it gets in the way for the betterment of all of us. So there is also something positive. This is where I get hope. The fact that we know there is common knowledge, and knowledge is essential to provoke change, but the other element is action. There should be popular action. So we should move outside of our comfort zone. And the United Nations, I wish the 100, I said it in February this year when I heard for the first time President Trump talking about the Gaza Riviera. I said, this is irresponsible. You shouldn't say that in the middle of all this. It's immoral. You shouldn't say that in the middle of all this. And it's illegal. It's illegal. And then 8 months later, that thing becomes a UN resolution. For me, this is the lowest point of the UN. At the moment, never before there was a precedent because there were also some awful decisions that were made on Western Sahara this year. And I said, oh my God, this has become a horse trading space more than before. But I would have never expected to see that so-called peace plan becoming a UN Security Council resolution. So we have to cope with it right now. The fact that the state of Palestine is part of it, or Arab countries are part of it. I mean, I don't know. Many people behind the scenes say there was no choice. There was no choice. There is always a choice. Even if it means breaking the system, there is always a choice. And the choice here is looking at what the anti-mafia movement has been in Italy. I mean, the mafia is the collusion between financial, economic power and interest and people and the political system. This is what the mafia is. Forget about Al Pacino and the gangster saga. This has been another tool of mass destruction. The mafia is what has allowed criminality to become institutionalized in certain places, but it's related to economic interests and financial growth and political administration of power. And when it was those who exposed it the most were judges, journalists, and lawyers who were killed in Italy during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But then there was a turning point. And people realized that this system wins only if it forces us into silence. And when people started protesting in mass, not scared of what they could lose individually, but convinced of what they could gain by standing together, things started to change. Has mafia been defeated? Not entirely, but surely in Sicily is not as present as it was. It has been uprooted for what in the violent form of control and domination as it was. But then, as with apartheid, it really takes generations to, and it's a continuous struggle. And the same thing today, the United States and Israel and the others are resorting to mafia-style techniques of abuse of power, institutionalized abuse of power, and intimidatory tactics. And the only way to resist to this is by uniting, really showing solidarity as capacity to stand together, not just the people, but member states. And this is what I hope member states will do within the United Nations system.
Francesca, thank you so much. I think it's fair to say that this is a moment where many people feel overwhelmed and powerless. And I think the fact that, along with strong denunciation, you always speak about the importance of solidarity and the possibility of transformation. It's what is encouraging many to continue to fight for what is fair and just, not just for the Palestinians, but for all of us. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for the work you do. You have many supporters in these countries and many people that continue to push for a fairer society because they're inspired by your work. Thank you very much.